Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to History Hijinks. I am your host, Ivan Petikov. I am joined today by my co-host,
Benjamin Polikov.
Awesome Sauce. So, on the show, we're pretty much going to be talking about really bizarre or just dumb historical events. You know, a lot of you out there think that history is boring, and I'm going to disprove that. So, Ben, you're the, guest for today. You want to start off with a story?
Yeah, I could start off with a story. This dates back before World War II. This was about like 38, 37. Joseph Stalin, Mussolini, and Adolf Hitler, all three of them, they actually got nominated for Nobel Prizes.
What category?
We don't know, but they were nominated. And they didn't win, obviously, for obvious reasons. But just the fact that they were nominated means all hope was lost at that time.
Wait, so Sweden was the one that nominates them, right?
Sweden's the one that nominates them. Yes, that's where Nobel,
Yeah, he originated it. So
that's where he originated.
Well, what was the plan here? At what point did he just go, "Hey, these three dictators are like killing millions? Let's
Yeah, I don't know. Swedes are just kind of weird, man.
I feel that. Speaking of World War II, you want to hear some crazy World War II inventions?
Definitely.
So the United States had patented a bunch of these. Wartime, it is profit time. You have a bunch of government grants to do crazy stuff with. For example, the bat bomb. Have you heard of the bat bomb?
What?
You would pretty much take a bunch of bats and you would tie little incendiary devices to them. And you just cram like thousands of them into a single bomb. And when you drop them, they just disperse everywhere. And the incendiary devices set off, and it's supposed to burn down the entire city. Since Japanese houses, a lot of them were made out of paper at the time. So the whole plan is, they get into dark crevices, they, settle down.
Yeah.
And that's when it just goes off. There was a successful testing run of this, and it was deemed too chaotic by the Department of Defense to actually employ.
Chaotic.
Another crazy invention is pigeon-guided missiles. So before there was guided missiles, there was a thing, yeah, man, this is a real thing.
Pigeon-guided? Like messenger pigeons?
Well, just like a regular pigeon.
Okay.
So you take a pigeon, right, and they had a little screen, where they would peck at it. They were trained to peck at any moving dot.
Yeah.
And so they'd give them a treat, when they hit the little dot. So they put them in a missile, and the whole point is that the missile would be just shot, generally aimed at a ship, and since from far away it looks like a dot, the pigeon would just tap it. So it would navigate itself to the enemy ship and pull off.
That's actually, that probably didn't work, did it?
Well, it wasn't, I don't think it made out of testing, so. No.
Oh, it didn't even make it out of testing, dang.
Mm-mm. See, the issue with that is that the pigeon is not really discriminatory at what ship it aims at.
So it just aimed at whatever ship it wanted to.
Exactly.
That's nice. That's great.
And the craziest one I found was Project Habakkuk. It was a British one this time. They wanted to make an iceberg aircraft carrier. They took a giant blob of ice. Because the thing with ice is, if you mix it with sawdust, it melts very slowly. It takes weeks to melt.
Really?
Yeah. So the plan here was to take a crap ton of ice and make it into a floating island, basically, like a giant aircraft carrier. Now, Winston Churchill actually was on board with this plan. They approved it before him.
Mm-hmm. So he was down for just.
He was down for it because what happened was the person in charge of the project, he showed up to Winston's cabinet, and he's like, "Here, I have 2 blocks of ice. One is just regular ice. The other one is filled with sawdust." And he just pulled out his pistol and just shot at both blocks of the ice, and it ricocheted off of the sawdust ice. And he's just like, "And this is my thesis for making an iceberg aircraft carrier.
Here, let me test my hypothesis. Bam." See, it made it then. Bam, it ricocheted off.
The most hilarious part is it almost hit an officer. It barely grazed by one of his legs, and they still okayed it.
So he almost killed one of his own officers. That's great. What a guy.
So
what a guy.
The project ended up being canceled because it turns out that making and maintaining an aircraft carrier made entirely of ice is extremely expensive. But it was an idea that was entertained by Churchill, nonetheless, himself.
Nice. Guessing that never even got into testing, didn't it?
No, they tried to make a mini model in Canada, and everybody was just like, no, this is too expensive. So you got any other stories?
I do, definitely. So, in the 1700s, a guy attended his own funeral.
Oh?
Yeah. So this guy, Timothy Dexter, he got rich out of literally pure luck. He made a name for himself. He sold stray cats and whale bones. So clearly that was a thing in the 1700s. That was big business back then.
What a man.
And he was even called a lord. Obviously he wasn't one. At one point he faked his own death. Just because he could. There was no reason. And he attended his own funeral. Like, he was with his wife. And she got suspicious of this man that she supposedly didn't know because he wasn't crying enough. So he wasn't ever found out.
Wait, so the wife like didn't recognize this man.
Didn't recognize the guy.
She didn't recognize her own husband?
Didn't recognize her own husband, who attended his own funeral. Which, by the way, nobody found out it was him, so he just kept on living, even though everybody thought he was dead.
That's depressing. Imagine you show up to your own funeral, nobody even recognizes you.
Very, very depressing. But yeah, it's one thing to fake your own death. It's another thing to show up at it. That's some Anchorman stuff right there.
So, speaking of strange businessmen, have you heard of Gregor McGregor? The name on its own is, like, suspicious, but
McGregor? No. Like Conor McGregor's dad?
Gregor McGregor.
Okay.
So, he was an Irishman during the 1820s, and he made up an entire country, the Republic of Poyais, in South America, and he sold government bonds on said country. So, the full story, this dude was a really renowned con artist at the time.
Yeah.
He wrote an entire book detailing like a fake Dutchman sailor's like journey of this specific country, right? And he sold that book, he distributed it, and he was so great at selling his government bonds. He had like 200 something people that were all moving out there. Now, in reality, this was just a random swamp that it was just kind of there. Like nobody really lived there. It was just abandoned, not even populated to begin with, and. So when the first ship of colonists showed up, they didn't believe that he was lying. They just thought they had landed at the wrong place. This is how good of a liar he was.
Swindler. That's actually pretty amazing.
Oh, no, there's more. Because since they were in a swamp and the ship just kind of dropped them off and abandoned them, they all were just kind of out there on their own. Like,
so what happened?
A lot of them died of malaria. They were all just kind of stranded on this swamp. A British merchant vessel actually came by. He was like, "Hey, you guys are in the wrong place. What are you here for?" And they're like, "Oh, no, we're here for this new country." He's like, "That doesn't exist." they're like, "No. This dude McGregor. He told us it exists." So this ship decided to go to the chieftain of the tribe that owned this swamp. Yeah. He physically brought him back, where this chieftain pretty much went, "Yeah, no, this isn't."
There is no new country.
There's no such thing as Poyais. Get the hell off my land. And so, on their way back, the ship intercepted 2 more ship of colonists that were heading towards this renowned Republic of Poyais. So, Gregor McGregor, he kind of got found out, so he escaped to France and started trying to do the same thing.
Nice. That's pretty funny.
He got away with it, too. He lived, like, a really long life. He was fine.
Nice.
They didn't, reprimand him for anything.
Swindler. Probably made a lot of money on that.
He blew a lot of it almost instantaneously. He was a renowned gambler.
Oh. That's great.
Imagine making up your own entire country and making millions off of it, only to just go to Las Vegas and just blow it all in slot machines. What a life.
Honestly.
What a man.
I mean, that's the way to go. Just make a lot of money and just get rid of it instantly.
Definitely.
Here, I have a story about Liechtenstein's military history. You know, Liechtenstein, very, very small country.
They have a military?
They had a military. They're a very, very small country. Fun fact about Liechtenstein, they are the world's #1 exporter of false teeth.
False teeth?
False teeth.
Like out of ivory?
Dentures.
Oh.
They are the world's #1 exporter of false teeth. But, here we go. So Liechtenstein didn't really have a large military for obvious reasons. They only had about 80 men. And there was a war between Prussia and Austria in 1866. So Liechtenstein sent 80 men because they were going to help out.
Help out who? Prussia or Austria?
I think Prussia.
Okay.
They came back with 81.
Somebody give birth on the way there or something?
Nope. They managed to make an Italian friend during the war. So they came back with more men than they started off with.
And then negative casualties.
In 2007, that was kind of when Liechtenstein sort of abolished its military. So as of right now, they're under Switzerland's protection, militarily at least. But this is one of the only cases that I've probably ever seen of a military coming back with more people than they left with, who weren't hostages. They just found an Italian friend. That is literally it. That is quoted. An Italian friend. That is all they brought back. So they came back with, let's see, there was 80 of them. They came back with 81, so that's what? An 100-some% growth? I don't know.
Stick to history, man. You're not outstanding.
Yeah, math isn't my thing.
So we talked about, I guess, positive military campaigns. You want to talk about a failure? So, the Battle of, I'm going to butcher this, Karanisibes is in the 18th century. Austria was at war with the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans were invading like southern and central Europe. They were pillaging. That was Austria-Hungary's land. So they sent over a garrison of over 100,000 men.
Yeah.
So there was a town that they were trying to defend. They thought the Ottomans were going to be there in a couple of days. So what happens is they get stationed, they kind of set up camp, and they set up their cavalry to cross the river to scout out. So after a couple of hours, the cavalry crosses the river and they buy some schnapps. Schnapps was an alcoholic beverage at the time.
Oh,
so it's like
yeah.
There was a traveling salesman, he just offers them some of it, and of course they buy it. When a couple of hours later the infantry crossed the river, they saw the cavalry having a fun time, and they demanded that, they get a little bit as well. The cavalry said, I'm going to keep it real. No, chief. This is ours. We bought it with our money. You go back to reporting to your drill sergeant. So a skirmish starts to break out between the cavalry and the infantry, right? You got some drunk cavalry who are just absolutely fighting them. Now, it escalates to the point of where somebody fires their gun. Probably an accident or something, right?
Yeah.
Now, here's where the true chaos starts. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was a very diverse one. You didn't just have Austrians, you had, Slavic peoples, you had, Italian peoples, this is a lot. Not everybody was a native German speaker.
Mm-hmm.
So, somebody starts to scream, Turks, Turks. They think that the Turks are coming. So everybody freaks out and just starts scattering. Everybody just runs away. When the officers show up to try to control everything, in German they start to scream, halt, halt. But since in the chaos, nobody can understand it, they think they hear somebody screaming, Allah, Allah. The battle cry of the Turks. And there was a lot of, let's just say that they lost a lot of good men on that day out of just pure stupidity. So the moral of the story is, don't drink, kids.
Don't drink. Don't drink at all, ever. I have an interesting story here.
Uh-huh.
So, there was a movie called The Deer Hunter with Robert De Niro and Christopher Walken. And there was a scene where they were supposed to play Russian roulette with, some Viet Cong soldiers because they were trapped. Well, something like this kind of happened, except it was between an American paratrooper and a bunch of Nazis. The paratrooper's name was Leonard A. Funk, so he's already got the name going for him. So he was trapped behind enemy lines after he dropped out of a plane. His fellow comrades, were all kneeling in surrender. And he was facing a pissed-off German soldier who was, grilling him and, trying to get him to say, gave any information about what the Americans were planning.
So he was interrogating him.
Yeah, but obviously Leonard A. Funk didn't know German.
No German, Speako.
No Speako Germanico, but Funk didn't know what he was saying, so he just kind of started laughing. he just kind of just broke out laughing. And then the German soldiers just started joining him too. Just like just out of nowhere, everybody just started laughing.
Contagious laughter, man.
Yeah. The thing is, once he had him distracted, he took out his Thompson submachine gun and like gunned them all down. There was 21 of them. He gunned all of them down.
Oh my god!
It was the perfect plan.
It's the Joker, the prequel.
Yeah, he gunned them all down. And then he got his soldiers who were surrendering to join in. And then the German battalion ended up surrendering. So it kind of backfired on him a little bit.
They just pulled a full 180. No you.
And he even quoted, it's even here quoted, that was the stupidest effing thing I've ever seen. He got him to laugh, and that's what he used to get him out of there. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's one way to go about it.
Laughter is the best medicine.
Laughter is the best medicine. And it also gets you out of being captured by Germans. So.
That's, there was not similar, but speaking of, like, just stupidity during World War II, some Russian fighters would keep, like, small arms inside their cockpit for in case, you get shot down, you have a parachute.
Mm-hmm.
The infantry didn't like fighters or bombers very much, so there wasn't much likelihood of them getting, captured. They just shoot them on the spot. So just in case you have a firearm. And there was a Russian fighter. He was in a firefight with a German, and he ran out of ammunition just midway through the fight. So the German fighter flies up next to him and starts taunting him. He realizes that he's out of ammunition, right? So he just flies up right next to him. He starts doing funny faces at him. He's like, "Oh, you're dead." And this particular fighter kept an MP40 in his cockpit.
Nice.
So he just took it out and he unloaded on the enemy German.
That's what you get for being cocky.
Yeah, that's true.
Should have shot him down first. Speaking of Soviets. So during the Cold War, apparently the CIA tried to create spy cats.
Spy cats?
Spy cats. To eavesdrop on the Soviets. You want to know what the operation was called?
What?
Operation Acoustic Kitty.
Just duct tape like a microphone to a cat.
Yeah, just duct tape a microphone to a cat or something. Yeah, so in the 1960s, they would bug kittens with, like, surveillance equipment, like microphones and whatnot. And they would hope they would walk around Soviet gatherings and just get a lot of information. This particular operation cost American taxpayers $20 million. So it wasn't a cheap operation. It failed. Horribly. Veterinary surgeons, like, implanted the cats with microphones and all that stuff around the Kremlin and, like, Soviet embassies. But when they were testing it out, they would just drop the cats off. And the cats would just walk around and go into the middle of the street and get hit by cars.
Oh, no.
So they would just... they wouldn't, like, clearly, like...
Yeah, what's the plan? You just kind of drop off a kid in Moscow.
Right, they just drop them off in the middle of Moscow and just expect the cat to be like, "Oh, there's the Kremlin, I gotta go over there and gather Soviet secrets."
Kitten, are you spy?
Meow!
Execute spy.
At least they could have given him, like, helped them out, just, like, toss some treats in the general direction. Just like, here, go get some fish or whatever. Fetch.
So, yeah, that sounds, there's a lot of, like, failed operations out there where people have thrown just millions of dollars into something that fails. And I absolutely love those kind of stories. But if you want to talk about a waste of taxpayer dollars, or at least the destruction of them, have you heard of the Killdozer? This was fairly recent. This was 2004. So in 2004, a man in Colorado made a makeshift tank. He had a bulldozer, and he just put a giant, like, concrete, like, casing around it, and rampaged over 13 buildings. Nobody was killed, right? But this entire story...
So much for Killdozer.
No, at the very start, like, you hear the story and you're like, oh my god, this dude was insane. But here's what happened. He was a small business owner. He owned, like, a repair shop, like a car repair shop. And there was only one road, so it was a little bit farther from town. There was only a single road going to it. the city started building a plant on that road, so there was no way that anybody can get to his thing. So he tried to appeal to the city council. He goes, "Hey, you guys are building on the only road that goes to my shop, so I'm not going to get any customers anymore. Can you guys help out?" And they just kind of like ignore him. They ghosted him. He took it to court. Court said, "No, get out of here." He was like, "Okay, what if you build a second road that goes around it?" He volunteered to buy all the equipment for it. He bought the bulldozer, and city still shut him down. So over the next 2 years, the man started planning his revenge. All the 13 buildings destroyed. This was calculated. He destroyed the buildings.
Oh, so it wasn't just like
it was town hall.
rampage.
It was like the homes of, for example, like the jury.
Oh, so he was just mad at like the city government.
No, yeah.
Oh, okay.
The police could not take this thing down. Like they just didn't have the capacity
Was
to.
it like bulletproof or anything?
It's concrete. It's like.
Oh yeah, damn.
It's like a good 6 inches of concrete, and once he sealed himself in, you can't get out.
Oh, so he just
sealed himself in. Yeah,
that's
he
it.
knew this was a suicide operation.
So he's basically it's basically do or die.
The senator of Colorado was literally about to call in an Apache on him. They were
An Apache.
yeah.
Damn.
But they decided maybe that's a little bit too extreme. It
I
may
mean,
or
that
may
does
not
sound a
cause
little
some more
extreme.
damage to the city. So at some point, the bulldozer did end up just getting wedged, just kind of like stuck. And there was a single gunshot heard from the inside. And once the police took a blowtorch and like got themselves inside, he was found dead. So the moment that the thing stalled and he got stuck, he had a plan. He just shot himself in the head.
So there was a casualty.
There was a casualty.
The one guy, the guy in the dozer.
Speaking of casualties, you want to hear about a battle that had no casualties until after it ended?
Yes.
So the American Civil War, right? It started off with the Battle of Fort Sumter. That was the first battle. Pretty much, there was a Union fort that the Confederates surrounded and started sieging. The siege only lasted for a couple of days, but the Union did have artillery, so they were just trying to hold out until somebody showed up. At some point, the Union commander said, "You know what? This is pointless. We can't hold out like this. We don't have much supplies left." So they surrendered. So, at the surrender, first of all, there was two things that happened. The Confederate general was proposing a toast for the surrender, and instead of drinking whiskey, he accidentally grabbed a bottle of iodine and just chugged it. So they had to pump his stomach. He survived. However,
he survived? Oh.
However, during the gunfire salute, like they take a cannon and they fire like a lamentary salute, right, to like solidify it. One of the guns malfunctioned, and it killed 2 Union soldiers.
So they basically died of just like an accident, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Want to hear a story about a Russian prime president and pizza?
Oh boy, I think I know where this is going.
You do?
Just the Pizza Hut ads?
No.
Okay, then I don't. Enlighten me.
In 95, secret agents alerted Bill Clinton that Russian president at the time, Boris Yeltsen, he was on Pennsylvania Avenue hailing a cab. He was in his underwear, completely blacked out. When he was asked what he was doing, he said he just wanted some pizza. So, like, this man is president of Russia in 1995. Largest country in the world. He's the president. He's running the whole show. This man's naked and blacked out on Pennsylvania Avenue trying to get pizza. I'm sorry, but he's an absolute bro for that.
You gotta keep it classy.
You gotta keep it classy, man. Definitely. Want to hear another funny story?
Tell me a funny story.
You want me to tell you about the only surgery to have 300%, what's it called rate?
Death rate?
Yeah.
Oh?
Yeah.
Did the dude like die 3 times or something?
No. That would be pretty funny though. But what happened was, this guy, Dr. Robert Liston. This was like Civil War era. And obviously medicine back then was basically
Amputation.
Choppy. Yeah. So he was in Scotland and he became interested in anatomy and like he learned how to become a surgeon. And basically, during the Civil War, he was a surgeon for the Union Army, and they had a soldier brought in. He had a big gash on his leg, so obviously amputate. What ended up happening was he did amputate the guy's leg. He also accidentally cut off his own arm.
How do you...
And one of the nurses died of like heat stroke or something. In whatever tent they were in.
In the operating room?
In the operating room. So the doctor died, the soldier died, and the medical nurse died. So this is the only 300% casualty rate surgery in recorded history. Which is really, really bad. So yeah, so not a lot of people respected him as a doctor afterwards.
I mean, he was dead.
Yeah, he was dead, but also he just managed to kill 2 extra people.
Yeah, I'm assuming they didn't pay him that much.
I'm assuming they did not. Probably didn't have a good funeral either.
Right. So, speaking of just like people kind of collapsing over and dying, there was this Byzantine emperor, Basil II. His nickname was the Bulgar Slayer. And here's why. In 1014, he was at war with Bulgaria, right? Mm-hmm. So this was a pretty big thing. It was at a stalemate for a couple of years. So he had a lot of pent-up rage. Like, he could never get on the upper edge. Finally, however, there was a battle where he took superiority and he captured 8,000 prisoners. And since this guy was absolutely just upset with Bulgaria, he's like, I'm done. He ordered them all to be blinded. All their eyes were either gouged out or, like, burned or something.
Oof.
But 1 in every 100th man got to keep one of their eyes, so they could guide these 8,000 men home. And when the Bulgarian emperor saw like this blind army coming home, the dude just had a stroke and just died.
Just had a stroke. That's it.
I mean, can you really blame him? Like, imagine.
Can I blame a man for having a stroke?
Well, you see your army. You send out like an army of like 8,000 guys, and they all come home and they don't have any eyes.
Yeah, that is actually kind of creepy.
You have an entire generation of people now that just can't see.
They just can't see. Yeah, there we go. There's going to be a lot of seeing eye dogs. Let's see here. Interesting story. In 1895, there were 2 cars in the entire state of Ohio. It's a pretty decent sized state, right?
Yeah.
They managed to crash into each other.
Just the only 2 cars?
The only 2 cars.
In 85?
In the whole entire frickin' state in 1895. Crashed into each other.
Where was this?
Ohio. That's why everybody hates Ohio. They're stupid.
Well, see, Michiganders have a different quarrel with Ohio. We have the, we almost went to war. No, we did go to war.
We went to war with them over Toledo.
Or this tiny little, like, 2-mile Toledo strip. And the federal government just went, hey, you guys want, like, half of Wisconsin? And that's what the Upper Peninsula became, yeah.
We should have taken Toledo. Should have taken Toledo. Oh, you want to know about the first ever recorded mooning?
Oh?
Yeah. So, in 66 AD, a Roman soldier, this was the first ever recorded mooning, a Roman soldier mooned a giant group of, like, Jewish hostages. This led to a riot, which led to the death of, like, 2,000 hostages and a couple hundred Roman soldiers.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, this dude flashed his butt and managed to kill, like, 200 of his own brothers in his army. So, yeah.
So, speaking of stupid causes of conflicts, I mean, I have a couple of these, but I don't know. I think the most interesting one is the War of Jenkins' Ear. So, during the 18th century, tensions were high between Spain and Britain, because, they're colonizing. This is, like, the big colonial era.
Yeah.
And there was, Captain Jenkins was caught pretty much smuggling in the Caribbean, which was Spanish. The Spanish boarded his ship. There was a small quarrel, and his ear got cut off by one of the Spaniards that was boarding the ship.
Oof.
Full of bitter resentment, he kept his ear inside of like a jar of whiskey for multiple years,
Nice.
presented it before British Parliament, and they went to war with Spain because of that.
Because he lost his ear?
Because they boarded his ship. That was like his evidence that the Spanish boarded his ship.
His evidence that they boarded his ship was that he lost an ear?
Yeah, he could have been just great. He could have just
He
cut
could
it
have
on
just
his own.
been like completely making that up for all they knew.
Yeah, imagine Van Gogh. He cuts off his ear and he's just like...
Yeah, he cut off his ear and he was like, I'm just going to paint myself without my ear and see how that goes. And, I mean, it went pretty well for him, honestly.
No, it did not. His life was pretty sad.
His life was sad, but that painting is pretty popular.
Only after death, though.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I don't know. Britain during colonization was really crazy. Because there was a high demand for sailors, right?
Yeah.
Do you know how they get sailors?
Not really.
You would go into a pub, and everybody's drunk, right? They're not going to be completely there with their senses. And they would slip a coin into the drinks. Now, I guess to be officially enlisted into the British Navy, you are given what's called a king or queen shilling. That's like the coin. It's like your first salary.
Yeah, yeah.
So you need to do a toast, like you need to drink to the king, and you need to accept your first, shilling. And, people just, do a shot. At the very bottom, there's a king's shilling. There you go. You're enlisted. They just violently grab you and they just drag you out. This got to such a problem that they would start boarding American ships and just enlisting them into sailors. To which America said, no, you're not doing that. That's bad. And that's part of why we remained neutral during the War of 1812. Or I'm sorry, during the Napoleonic Wars. Not 1812. That's why we got angry with Britain.
So, bit off of what you were talking about. You want to learn about the 1904 Olympic Marathon?
Okay.
So, 1904 Olympics were held in St. Louis. So that was one of the first times it was held in America. And this was probably one of the worst marathons ever. First off, let's say, I think it was about 198 participants, 22 finished. 22 finished.
For the Olympics?
Yes, this is an Olympic race. This is an Olympic marathon.
Jesus,
22 people finished.
Was the marathon going through a landmine field? Why did so few people finish?
I mean, no, but here is the details. St. Louis wasn't obviously as big as it was now back then. So most of its roads were dirt, which is a big issue for runners because their trainers would be in front of them with cars and all that dirt would be flying in there and, going into their lungs. So that wasn't definitely not a good thing. The second part was there wasn't any water. You kind of need water when you're running, right?
A long marathon, yeah.
Yeah, the only water source that was even, close was about 3/4 of the way through the entire marathon.
Oh.
Not only that, but there was one athlete who was given strychnine, a rat poison. He was given strychnine to make him run faster.
What?
Yeah, his trainers were kind of weird. They gave him rat poison. They gave him whiskey. They wouldn't let him drink water.
Here's a poison. The antidote is at the finish line.
Yeah,
now go.
So they wouldn't let him drink water. They kept giving him whiskey, and they gave him egg yolks, raw egg yolks, to get him through the race.
Okay.
After he finished the race, which, by the way, he had to help across the finish line by his two trainers. After he finished the race, he lost 30 pounds.
I imagine.
During the duration of this race, he lost 30 pounds.
You'd just be vomiting every second of the way.
Yeah, he was. I mean, they gave him strychnine, raw egg yolks, which, someone else. They gave him whiskey, so he was drunk off his ass. I don't know how they expected this to go well. No, and not only that, just it's crazy to think that 22 people finished this race of 198 participants.
Did he finish first?
No, he finished. He was supposed to finish. He won the Boston Marathon the year prior, So he was like up there on the list of like people to finish. He ended up finishing 6th, which wasn't that bad, considering that only 22 people finished. The guy who finished first, 1, wasn't representing any country. 2, went from Cuba to St. Louis illegally. Like, he like boarded boats and all that stuff. Not only that, but this guy, like, there was a picture of him. He was wearing, like, long johns, street shoes. Like, he was wearing really, really, like, awful clothes for this type of situation. Because it was a marathon, obviously. This guy just managed to finish first on pure luck. Not only that, halfway through the race, this guy decided to take a nap under an apple tree.
It's like
Just took a nap under an apple tree, and he still finished first.
it's like the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah,
like,
except
story,
the
except
hare
he
won
wins.
this time. But yeah, this was probably one of the worst Olympic just events ever. It was horrible. The only good thing that probably to come from this was it was the first one to ever have African Americans compete.
Okay.
So that's definitely a plus, but that's just like crazy, man.
All right, so we're running out of time here, so I'm gonna do one more story. Ben, you got a little bit of stubble there, right? So
A little bit.
let's talk about some beard tax. You got to pay me money for having facial hair. So you're familiar with Peter the Great, right? The Russian emperor
Yes,
in the
of course.
17th, 18th centuries.
Yeah.
So he wanted to Europeanize Russia. He like visited a lot of Western Europe. He was a student there and so on and so forth. So when he came back, he was like, "All right, boys, we got to be more Western." And during the time in Europe, facial hair was seen as, or at the very least beards, was kind of seen as like barbaric. So people would shave. People wouldn't really walk around with beards in Western Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Eastern Europe and like Nordic countries in general, however, it's the other way around. Like a beard is kind of like, it's a portrayal of your manlyhood. Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. So in order to resolve this, Peter the Great decided, hey, I'm not going to make this mandatory, but I am going to start taxing people who have beards. So every year, if you had a beard, you had to pay tax, depending on like whatever class you were. Like it was based on how much money you were
So
making.
it was based on like if you were poor, you probably paid a.
You barely paid anything.
Yeah.
But however, if you were the nobility that lived in his castle,
Yeah.
he would just walk around and he'd just like randomly shave you. Like he'd just yank your beard off.
That sounds like it hurts a little.
It does hurt, yeah. But you know what? Such is the way to westernize.
Yeah,
Ripping off
westernized
beards.
by literally cutting off beards and making people pay taxes for them. I think the taxes is more western than the beards.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that being said, he did do a lot of reforms that did help make Russia a big power, but this is among the more crazier stuff.
That's whack.
Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, we will be coming to a close today. Thank you for joining us for Historical Hijinks. This has been your host, Ivan Petikov, and
I'm Benjamin Black.
thank you very much.